the outset, I want to caution each one of you, you are in for business appointment. So anything that starts on a high, from there has only one way to go, which is downhill. Those were exceptionally kind words, Mr. Parekh. I'm not sure it's truly deserving. When I accepted the invite, Purvi sent over, and I accepted this invite, I had a lot of trepidation, two kinds. One, chartered accountant. I am not. So going back to my college days, for a number of you, it's prehistory. My batch was the first batch where you could do CA alongside BCom. Right? So you had to give an entrance exam and then do CA, and so it was possible for someone to do CA in the day and do evening college BCom, and whatever, 3-4 years you become both a BCom graduate and chartered accountant. So where I lived in Madras, we were 17 of us in Vivekananda College who were part of the BCom program, and this announcement I think came in August. College started in July, this announcement came in August 1980. Your parents hadn't met, I know. Right? So 1980 this announcement came in, and out of the 17 people from my colony area, 16 people went and registered for CA, and there was this one idiot who did, out of fear. Out of sheer fear, because people had said the pass percentage is 1%, 1.5%. I said, I am nowhere in the top 1.5%. Dilli bahut dur hai. Not that I knew Hindi then, but I told myself, this is a very long shot for someone like me. With great difficulty, I was getting through in life. So I'm here standing in front of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, which is the first source of trepidation. The second, Purvi said it's for an hour. The last time I sat through a lecture for an hour was when I was a student. And the countdown begins when the hour starts. If it is 60 minutes of lecture, the countdown begins at the first minute. T minus 60, T minus 59, and so on. So I'm dreading how you are going through this. Right? I hope nobody put a gun to any of you to be here in person for this. But that was my second fear. So on the first one, that I'm not a chartered accountant, you can do nothing about it. But the fact that I have fear of this 1 hour lecture, you can do something about it. If possible, make it participatory. Put your hand up, don't throw things, put your hand up, ask questions, right? And let's make this a two-way process. The third source of trepidation, but that happened 10 minutes ago, is the topic that Purvi gave me and the topic Mr. Bilaboria spoke about are different. Right? So he spoke about role and challenges of an internal auditor. I am not prepared for that. The topic she gave me was internal auditors as change agents.
Basically, what I meant was that the changes which are happening.
Okay, wonderful. Changes which are happening. I've also pursued for several years to make one change, but I'll tell you that after the lecture to myself, but it hasn't happened. So the topic, therefore, I have accepted for myself for today, for this evening, is internal auditors as change agents. That's the topic I've accepted for myself. So what I want to do is, the framework I want to adopt is share with you my understanding of change agents. What makes a change agent, right? I'll give you a couple of examples. Hopefully you buy into that. And then once you buy into that, then let's see how that maps to an internal auditor. Which part of it maps and which part of it doesn't map. That's the second step of the process. In the third step, we look at how can an internal auditor be a change agent. Either by one's own function, role, or in collaboration. And then we'll conclude by what does it take to adapt to all of this as an individual profession. No, it's not about following Amitabh Bachchan, but there are a few things. So that's the framework I put out for myself to say that I'll try and cover this over the next hour or so in this fashion. So when you hear the term change agent, there are a few names that come to your mind. Henry Ford. Henry Ford is arguably the world's greatest change agent when it comes to manufacturing. Henry Ford, who founded Ford Motors, introduced this concept of assembly line processing, manufacturing. And that assembly line manufacturing, as opposed to custom creation of a car at a single workstation, having an assembly line to produce automobile, was the single biggest transformation, not just to the automobile industry, but to almost every industry that has manufacturing as its core. Henry Ford was a change agent in a different sense. When people asked him that you're venturing into this automobile in such a big way, have you done any kind of market survey to estimate what the demand would be? Because what was the prevalent mode of transport there? Horse-drawn carriages. So there is a picture which appeared in New York Times early 1920s of Park Street full of horse-drawn carriages with a single automobile in the middle. So this board member showed this picture to Henry Ford and said, "You're fighting against the odds." Henry Ford's reply was, if I went and asked people what they wanted, they would have told me, please invent a faster horse-drawn carriage. So he was a change agent in terms of transformational thinking. So he was a change agent in a nuts and bolts manufacturing process by introducing the assembly line. And he was a change agent in his transformational thinking. He said, I don't need to ask people when I'm trying to bring about a revolution. Closer home, Mahatma Gandhi, another change agent. An Indian, born in India, but brought up in the professional world in South Africa. One incident transforms him and he wants to work his way back to India. When he comes to India, Gopal Krishna Gokhale advised to him when he goes to Indian National Congress and say, I want to do something for the country. The advice he got was, you don't know the country. Go travel. So he spent a lot of time in trains traveling the length and breadth of India to understand what India is. But he was a change agent because he was the first one to talk about the word Swaraj, independence, self-rule. Till then, the premise of the Indian National Congress was give us a role in government. Hey, Mr. Britt, accommodate me in the governance. It was not, hey, Mr. Britt, chal baju, I will take over. That transformational thought process was brought in by Mahatma Gandhi. But contrary to all that was happening in the rest of the world independence movement, Mahatma Gandhi embarked on this path of ahimsa. So Mahatma Gandhi is a reformative change agent who introduced a very powerful concept of self-rule, and through, in my view, through the most powerful means at the cost of exaggeration. Non-violence is possibly the most violent means because the samne wala, the opposite guy, can't do a thing if you are steadfastly non-violent. You're not doing anything to the person. So how can I react? So that would be another example of a change agent that would come. Martin Luther King, United States, who fought for equality of rights for black Americans. Another example. 24th of July 1991, an important day for two reasons. The first is not relevant at this discussion, but the second reason is that's the day Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh presented the new industrial licensing policy and the path-breaking budget. India embarked on a path of liberalization. They played the role of change agents back then. Fast forward, the speed at which we have adapted to digital at a pace that would put some of the developed countries to shame. The Prime Minister certainly deserves a lot of credit at his doorstep. You must have read enough stories about people traveling with paper COVID certificates folded and kept carefully inside their passport. And here is this third world country which had it in a digital form that you could flash from your phone to any agent. That is change. These are change agents that we all know and relate to. And that could be applicable to any profession. But I'm standing here in a chartered society on a topic on internal audit and as the chief internal auditor of a large corporate in India. So I need to go beyond these examples. I don't know how many of you have seen a movie called Ghulam. It's a movie of the late 90s. Amir Khan was the hero of that movie. The song from the movie is pretty popular, Aati Kya Khandala. But I am not interested in the song. Amir Khan's brother is an auditor, internal auditor, in an interesting business. The business that he works for does black marketing of movie tickets. Today it is non-existent, so a lot of the kids will not relate to what black market is. But back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, if you wanted to see a movie early, you went there and there were touts who would sell tickets. Amir Khan's brother in the movie, played by Rajat Kapoor, was the auditor. And he had his review mechanism to see which of the touts of this mafia don who were in this were submitting correct accounts and which of them were submitting fudged accounts. So here is a business of crooks, but it's a business of crooks that demands high level of integrity. It's an imperfect market. There is no ticker tape to say this is the price of the black market ticket. But Rajat Kapoor devises a system to keep track, to catch who is fudging and who is not fudging. Going back in time to maybe 5,000 years ago, in Ramayana, when Ram had to fight the battle, the bridge had to be built. A bridge had to be built, and it was decided to have the monkey army lead the building of the bridge. And Samudra Raja ordered the building of the bridge. The famous scientist Vishwakarma, son Nala, was appointed the chief engineer. But the smart man that Samudra Raja was had a continuous review process. So the bridge, on day one, they built what is called 8 yojanas. 1 yojana is 8 miles. By the 5th day, they had crossed 20 yojanas. And soon they hit 100 yojanas. All that he had was somebody come and review what went right, what needs improvement. So there was an inherent internal audit process there which brought about this change. The third, there was this young analyst listening to a promoter meeting, and promoters come in and present their quarterly results with their team of CFOs, CEOs, marketing experts, sales experts, everyone, and they present. So this analyst, being a chartered accountant, had obviously gone beyond just what the presentation was and started looking at source data. And in the source data, this analyst found a certain number almost constant for several quarters. And what was that number? Bank balance. About $2 billion bank balance was a constant figure appearing over several quarters. Bank balance reflecting like a dead man's heartbeat is too good to be true. If something is too good to be true, it is not true. So this person popped a question: is this figure correct? And that led to the unraveling of one of the biggest scams of corporate India. The person may not have been an auditor, he was an analyst. But the process he employed was not look at, as she said, not look at anything on the surface, scratch it, get to the bottom, do some research. So what is common to these three examples? Black market, an imperfect market. You can strengthen controls through checks and balances. Building a bridge across the sea, continuous monitoring can lead to continuous improvement. And this constant bank balance, identifying that, brought bank reconciliation back to its prime status in audit. Till then it was relegated, bank reconciliation is for freshers, first year audit clerks to do, not something that the partner would ever want to look at. Suddenly developed sex appeal and was right front and center of every partner to see how did this bank reconciliation happen. But the core of all of this is each of these brought about irreversible change. You can deal with an imperfect market, not necessarily black marketing of movie tickets, but there are several businesses which deal with the imperfect market. But you can institute a set of checks and balances to have some semblance of control over the imperfect market. When I was waiting to come in, Mrs. Parekh made a statement. We only worry about things that we control. Everything else we don't bother. Should we really be that? Or can we find those checkpoints that will tell us what is in store? The three buckets: things that you have complete control, things that you have influence over, and things over which you have neither control nor influence. Typically, risk managers operate in the first two, and then on the third they pray. If hope is the strategy, prayer is risk mitigation. You need to have a more considered, rigorous approach to this. So therefore, it doesn't matter whether you have control or not. If you can identify a set of checks and balances and find a way to track it, then even though the outside market may be imperfect, you can bring in a semblance of control. Each of these are irreversible changes, continuous monitoring. Today we use fancy terms, data analytics. Right? Look at data. And I must tell you, if you torture data hard enough, it will own up to anything. So look at data, but don't lose track of your own common sense. Look at data when you have some hypotheses in your head to validate. Don't just stare at data because it can tell you things which may not be relevant at all. So you can continuous monitoring in whatever form, whether it is data driven or observation driven or just management by walking around, continuous monitoring, which is an integral audit process, can lead to continuous improvement. And in the review process, there is no such thing as this doesn't have sex appeal and that has. There's no such thing as this is detail, I don't need to worry. Leave that to the MDs. As good chartered accountants, as good auditors, every little detail matters. Bank reconciliation project. So when we talk about change agents, intrinsic to that expression is change is positive. Intrinsic to the expression is change is selfless. I've tried to lose weight, become trim like several others, but I have not succeeded. But even if I do succeed, that one in a million chance, that is not a change agent. But if I therefore institute certain practices that helps to improve health for several people, then I become a change agent. So change agent necessarily means it is positive. Change agent necessarily means it is selfless. The topic I was dreading that Puru would give me, because I believe my predecessor had spoken about it, is internal auditors are watchdogs, not bloodhounds or something. I was dreading that topic because I am not a career internal auditor. My first role in internal audit. So fortunately, I have been given a topic which is 180-degree opposite of it, which is to talk about the positive impact of internal audit. Right? She was very kind to talk about all the different ways we can influence change. He was talking about the different approaches internal audit could take to bring about change. I want to, again, for want of a better thing, establish a little framework on which I want to speak. And the intent of a framework is to make sure that I cover it as comprehensively as I can. And I am going to give a lot of personal experiences, examples. Yes, they may be from the Mahindra group, but that is irrelevant. The underlying case is what is relevant here. If you work as long in life as I have, which is about 40 years, then, and if you worked in reasonably large size corporations, you have met with a tribe called management consultants. I admire, envy the tribe. Their ability to look well informed on any subject is phenomenal. Have you ever seen a management consultant who says, I don't know this topic? So it's phenomenal. And over the years, after careful observation, analysis, reflection, I believe their strength comes from the fact that they can bring everything down to a capsule and focus on the capsule so that you're not distracted by 10 other things. Focus on the capsule. It's almost like the camera effect. If you've studied how who's that suspense maker, movie maker, the guy who made Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock. If you see his Alfred Hitchcock movies, the camera did the trick. So management consultants have this phenomenal ability to make any subject, however complex it may be, whether it's about safety pins or nuclear reactors, they would bring it down to a capsule or called a framework and then get you to focus on the framework. And that framework is represented by what is popularly called a 2x2 matrix. Heard of it? If you've heard of 2x2 matrix. You don't have to feel shy. Okay? So 2x2 matrix. So in change agents, I have got my own 2x2 matrix. One is about the quantum of change. Is the change not linear but transformational? Is the change over the long term? Is the change what is called strategic? Or Is the change incremental? Is the change tactical? Is the change immediate? So that's one axis, let's call that the y-axis. That the change is transformational, long range, long term, strategic is y-axis top and y-axis bottom. In this 2x2 matrix, is change is tactical, incremental, immediate. X-axis, is the change intuitive? Somebody's gut, somebody's pet, or is the change coming about through a lot of analytics, through a lot of observation, through a lot of market research? Right? So that's your x-axis. Can you visualize in your head? X-axis, left extreme, intuitive, gut. And this is how I think it is. And what, at the other end of x-axis is data-based, analysis-based, analysis paralysis-based. That's your x-axis. And y-axis is long-term strategic versus short-term tactical. So change agents can be bucketed into four. So there are four spaces. On top left, where it's completely intuitive and far-reaching, like Steve Jobs. Nobody had thought of that you can just touch a screen. Transformational. He didn't go around asking people, would you like a touch screen? He just went about making the change. Right? That is an example of a change agent which is on the top left column, who went by his sheer force of his conviction, his belief, his gut, and embarked on a scale that nobody had thought of. In a sense, he championed. Right. So on the top left is a champion. You move to the top right. An example that comes to my mind is, you may relate to this, HDFC Bank. I had the privilege of meeting with the management team, again, for the benefit of the kids here, back in the 90s when the bank was being conceptualized. So in that stage, there were two broad buckets, Indian banks and foreign banks. There was somebody who thought about a space called, I want to deliver services like a foreign bank, but to an Indian bank customer. Think about it. I want to deliver services like a foreign bank, which means high-tech, technology-driven, focus on customer service. But to an Indian bank customer, because that's where the volume is. Foreign banks didn't even cater to 0.1% of the market. So you want volume, which comes from where the Indian banking is, but you want high-tech service. That would be a strategist. That would be a strategist. So the top right quadrant would be somebody who sets up a big business plan and backs it with big investment on the basis of an analysis that this is how I can move to become big. The third, somebody more intuitive but is not thinking too long term, is thinking quick fixes. I'm not going to name any politician example, but politicians, social workers, movie actors, producers, people in art will be there. Because they don't have the patience to wait for the effect to come after 3 years, 5 years. They live Friday to Friday. So I need to do something now that will catch people's fancy and imagination now so that my cash box is ticking. That's the third quadrant. Okay? That's an intuitive person. The fourth quadrant is the one that has the least sex appeal. It has a lot of pouring through data, lot of analysis paralysis, and the impact is not some far-reaching changes, the impact is incremental. And that is continuous improvement. It is that continuous improvement that drives internal audit. So it's not about being watchdog or bloodhound. The positive role of internal audit is it drives continuous improvement. So that's my framework on which I want to appeal to you as to how internal audit can play the role of change agent. But that incremental changes, for it to be a change agent, remember my first set of examples, irreversible. If Manmohan Singh's budget could be reversed by the next government, then it would fail the test of change agent. So you need it to be irreversible. So continuous improvement, but continuous improvement for the better and not any scope for reversal. And the audit process has inherent checks to it. So it's not just about the audit and the recommendation for improvement, but there is a review on that on the action tape. So you don't spare anybody easy. You make sure that the task is done thoroughly. Right? So it is this quadrant, bottom right quadrant, of y-axis incremental tactical near-term, x-axis backed by detailed analysis, review, scrutiny, digging deeper, researching, developing conviction, and back of which making recommendation that shows continuous improvement. That is the forte of change agency that internal audit can do. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to move this to say how we've tried to do that. My experience is limited to one organization because I'm not in a firm or have worked a long life in this, so I'm going to limit it to my experience. So when I came into this role, I said, what should be the focus of internal audit? Not that I've been a consultant in my life, but at least having lived and watched enough of them, admired them, envied them, I've learned a few things. So I said, you need a framework. What is it that I would focus upon? The first is policy, the toe to the top. The Ganges flows from the top. Right? So it is important that any process, any business, any strategy has the right tone at the top. Because that is what percolates through the organization. So all audit will start with reviewing the tone at the top. Whether it's policy, including something like employee retention. You have a policy on it. Have you spelled out what you want to achieve and how you want to go about achieving it? Customer service. Have you spelled out what customer service means? What is acceptable, not acceptable? Right? That is the tone at the top that has to come through. So audit starts with looking at the tone at the top. And then you look at what I call the Maslowian hierarchy. Process is the ballast. There is no escape from it. You have anything that you do, you have to look at the process. A set of processes make a system. That's your second tip. For the processes and systems to work well, you need a bunch of controls. But for all of this to achieve the desired purpose, you need a strong governance framework. So the Maslowian hierarchy is process, systems, controls, governance. And as you go up the hierarchy, the materiality increases and the tolerance for deviation reduces. If a voucher is processed wrong, I don't have a problem. But if a decision or a code of conduct issue is wrong, I have a huge problem. So my tolerance for deviation is lower, the materiality is higher as I go up this Maslowian. So first I look at the policy guidelines, SOPs, which sets the tone at the top, and then this Maslowian process of process, controls, or process, systems, control, governance. And that's what I do. When I look at policy, let me give you an example. I hope enough of you remember your 7th or 8th standard geometry. You have done it most recently, you should remember. You have this concept of theorems and riders, theorems and corollaries. So one of the things is about proving hypotheses. 2 points determine a straight line. But if you have to prove collinearity, you needed 3 points. You never proved it with 2, you have to prove it with 3. And this is where policy comes in. And this is where it's very important. You will see a lot of business managers, CEOs stand up and pronounce to the world, we have zero tolerance for this. We put a lot of emphasis on customer service. We are a completely customer-centric company. We deal with complaints in 24 hours. That's the posture. We encourage, in recruitment, we encourage diversity. It's a great statement to make, right? So I call this posture. This is what you purport to be to the outside world. That's your posture. And who is watching this? Your consumers, your stakeholders are watching you make these pronouncements. And then you write a policy on what defines customer service. That if an automobile comes for repair, I have to turn it around in 24 hours or 48 hours. And then you have a practice, which is 60% of the cars are done in 48 hours, 20% are done in 72 hours, so on and so on and so forth. So going back to geometry, you want to track the collinearity. The collinearity between posture, which is what I purport to be, policy, which is what I have spelled out as how I want my customer service to be, and practice, which is what I actually do. The day, and it's only internal audit, I can tell you this. It is not the CFO, it's not the strategy manager, it's not the stat auditor. The stat auditor doesn't even look at these. None of these guys can comment on this. It's only the internal auditor who can comment on this. And that's how you drive change. You drive change by saying either you align what you're doing to what you claim to be, or talk less. And internal audit is a function that can speak up. It's not bothered about anyone. It can speak up. Right? So that's the collinearity point. And that's why I start always with policy and then try and see how it has been presented to the outside world. It could be a consumer, it could be to government, it could be to other stakeholders. We respect supply chain. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people use that expression. We respect supply chain. Go to the weakest elements of the supply chain, which is your unorganized sector. And then try and see, have you demonstrated the same development goals, sustainable development goals with this segment as you have with others. Right? So you can be a change agent by driving your activity to reduce the gap between posture, policy and practice. Shifting gears to systems. One of the most important things for an organization is one source of truth. And it's when I came into this role, I said, well, that's obvious. There has to be only one source of truth. But then I realized that there are several, I think you use that expression, smart people within quotes, right? Too clever by half. Several clever people who have this principle of running multiple systems. And I tell people openly, this stopped, even Bollywood movies stopped this in the 70s. Government के दिखाने के लिए एक set of books, taxman को दिखाने के लिए एक set of books, labor union के दिखाने के लिए तीसरा, बीवी को दिखाने के लिए चौथा, right? Multiple sets of books depending on who you wanted to show what. This country has moved from there. So there has to be one source of truth. Whatever be the business you're in, there has to be one source of truth. And the only people who can drive that change are not the IT folks who can claim to be. Stat auditors, again, far away from this. They don't care. They deal with what is given to them, and then they have this overarching sentence, based on management representation. It's such an easy profession. Okay. So, one source of truth becomes important to make sure that everybody in the organization is looking at the same data. Imagine, and I'm not taking the name of a bank, but there was a bank which had an entire business running on a separate set of books, separate system altogether compared to the main bank. And at the end of the day, that separate set of books would give 2 entries for the balance sheet and 2 entries for the P&L. How many new assets? How many repayments? How many fresh loans? How many repayments touching the balance sheet? How much interest received? How much interest paid? 4 entries from this big block of consumer business to the main banking system. There's no one source of truth. How do you validate? And this one source of truth then, therefore, like a theorem and corollary, has its own subclasses. The entire organism, one of the good things about ERPs is transaction type. I have to perforce use a certain transaction type to make sure the certain control is validated for that transaction. So a difference between goods coming in through the door and goods used for production is different from missing stock. So if I use the wrong transaction type, I miss the wrong set of controls. And the only people who see this are internal auditors. Let me tell you, there are times when I wonder, are we really third line of defense or are we the first? Right? The only people who check these 3 data points and see that, have you used the right transaction type? Because for everybody else, this is inconsequential. I'm interested in production declaration. I'm interested in passing entries and closing the books. Which transaction type have you used? Is it material? Right? So that's when I gave my Bollywood, जाओ उस आदमी का साइन लेके आओ जिसने ये transaction type बनाया. Why did he make this transaction types as different? उसके बाद talk to me. So systems are extremely important to make sure that there is one source of truth, and that one source of truth in all its subcomponents are respected pan organization. Sometimes when I was chief risk officer, I used to go around telling people, if you want to know what is true vulnerability of an organization, just for one day, switch off Microsoft Excel. Just for one day, switch off Microsoft Excel. I'm on ERP, I'm on Oracle, I'm on this. All that may be there, dikhava. But what is really working is Microsoft Excel. I have to pass vendor price increase based on commodity price cycle. Where is that processing done? Microsoft Excel. I have to pay these transport bills across 500 routes, 20,000 transactions in each. Where is that processing done? Microsoft Excel. And where is the wash basin or receptacle where it is passed? ERP. You can't correlate. So when you have systems, it is important that not just the subsets like you use the right transaction type, but it is a system that is used and the audit trail is maintained in that system, not in standalone, uncontrolled Excel sheets. As internal auditors, and we are the only ones who look at it. And I can tell you, I can write a thesis on this. There are several people who look at a building and admire. Only one small set of people who will look at how the drainage is working, how the sewage is working, how the plumbing is working, how the leakage is working. That's the business of internal audit. The unglamorous part, but which will look at details, which nobody else knows. Right? And that's how you bring change agents. bring change into the system. Governance. What is the difference between strategy and governance?
One is present and other one is futuristic.
Okay? It's present, the other is futuristic.
Governance is the mode in which you work strategy.
How well you do is determined by strategy. How you do well is determined by governance. What is it that you would do and not do is determined by governance. That's the difference. So how do you bring about change in governance? If there is discretion in decision making, please back it up with documentation. Because there has to be a verifiable audit trail to say that this single vendor is the only one I could find for this service. Because subsumed in that is price discovery, subsumed in that is vendor qualifications. How would I know that if you haven't put it? Now one of the things people say, but it's been signed by somebody. Right? It has been signed by higher authorities. I know he or she is the higher authority, I know this is the signature. I don't want evidence of authority. I want evidence of application of mind behind that decision. Governance is forcing people to put down on sheet of paper the evidence of application of mind. Nobody can argue against that. At one of our internal meetings, somebody said, but you're asking for things that is not practical. So I said, I'm not paid for being practical. I'm paid for being impractical. So governance is about influencing change to make sure that whatever is scripted as the groups or individual companies' code of conduct, ethics, values, all get translated into the actual practice. We subscribe to some sustainable development goal. Please demonstrate. We are customer first. Please demonstrate. We have zero tolerance to something. Please demonstrate. And that demonstration is by application of mind. And that the only thing I can verify, I can't read your mind. I can read what's written on the sheet of paper or in the system. And that has to be tagged with the transaction. So that's the governance part. So this is what an internal auditor can do from within. But an internal auditor has a very advantageous position to partner with a few people and make changes. Now, as she mentioned, my previous job was Chief Risk Officer. So one of the things I would display in my presentation is, since I represent an automobile company, is the contrast between risk and internal audit. So that beautiful windshield looking into the future is risk management. That small little rear view mirror looking back at what had happened is the internal audit. But there is a way these two can be symbiotic. The biggest contributor to assessing operational risk is internal audit. Risk management can go around the world 3 times, or like Ganesh go around his parents 3 times. But they will not get a clue on what operational risk is without looking at internal audit reports. So internal audit can influence change, bring visibility, bring sunlight to areas that are not normally looked at. Because what is normally looked at in risk management? What's happening in the Middle East? You have neither control nor influence over that. But we will spend hours discussing what's happening in the Middle East. But this is your weaknesses in your system. Your customer service is hurt because of spare supplies not being on time. And that who points out the internal audit. So therefore, there is an opportunity for internal audit to partner with risk management to bring operational risks to focus in risk management. And risk management is a board level committee. Every listed company has a risk management of a certain size, has a risk management committee, and typically they may have a different set of people from the audit committee So you're bringing this focus to a larger number of people on the board, and that's how you influence change. Similarly, business excellence. You can partner with business excellence team, whatever it is called, process re-engineering, business process re-engineering, quality, whatever be the nomenclature of it. But any function that is working on reviewing what is working well, what can be changed, either to bring about more efficiency or bring about more effectiveness or strengthen controls, whatever be the motive, or improve customer service. Whatever be the motive of that function, where would they have useful data points from? Internal audit. So what you can't do by yourself, you can do by partnering with. Finally, what is incumbent on a change agent? Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. So you have to first change. So in your own way of looking at things, in the way you operate, you have to bring change. And I bucket that into three areas. First, do more with less. Can you bring about efficiency in your own operations? And the world is wide open today compared to say 5 years ago. You've got so many tools, technology available for you to do more with less. Of course, it's my pet peeve that the world's best natural intelligence is invested in finding artificial intelligence. There can't be a bigger joke on mankind than this. Right? But do more with less. Bring in efficiency into what you do. Raise the bar. So don't just focus on processes. Go raise the bar on your audit scope. Raise the bar on your audit standards. That's quality. Right? Focus on systems, controls, governance, policy framework. Raise the bar and add value. Audit has no independent intelligence, so there is nothing which tells me this is right and that's wrong. But if I'm auditing both, I can compare the two and say this is your benchmark. Add value by presenting thought papers. Add value by presenting comparative notes, best practices, benchmarking papers. So unless you demonstrate the change yourself, there will be no credibility with the rest. So as I keep saying that you need to do both. You need to walk the talk and you need to talk the walk. The second is not well appreciated. You need to walk the talk by conducting those at yourself. And you need to talk the walk. You speak from your conviction on it. If you can combine these, then it will augur well for each one of us as individual professionals to drive change. With that, I present my lecture part, open to any questions you may have.
The shift in your automobile industry, from a say petrol-based vehicle to a electric one, would it be considered as an agent of change?
It is considered an agent of change because that change is driven by environment considerations. Right? But it is, like she said, it will be scratching the surface. So shift from traditional fuel to electric fuel. What we understand today is just one part of it, which is instead of filling petrol, I have a battery and I plug that battery into this socket to recharge. But this power supply coming here is not renewable. The supply coming here is not renewable. So I've just switched from a dirty fuel to a not so dirty electricity. So that's not the full gamut of change.
Making available electric
Charging points, that is infrastructure. So therefore, what is the clamor of the industry? This is not any one individual player's game. Just think about it 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I was one of those guys who, because BPL was our client, I was at Morgan Stanley, and we got the first cell phones in the country. There were two things about it. One, if you spoke for a minute, it was 32 rupees. 1995 value, not today's value. So today's value, 32 would become whatever, 32,000 or 3,200 if not more. Right? So 1 minute was 32 rupees. And two, the instruments looked like weaponry. You could kill somebody with them. A whole lot of players, including the government, participated in the revolution. Which is why it said that what India could do with landline, it achieved with cell phone, and adoption and an adaptation far faster than most countries in the world. Right? So this change for the automobile industry is not in the hands of anyone. So if you take battery for example, there are two principal types of batteries. But those batteries, the supplier of that battery or the supplier of the components or ingredients of that battery is controlled by a handful of people around the world. And this dunya is not in your hand. Thank you. Hindi is not my first language, but I watch all Hindi. So what I'm saying is, you need to know what you have control, influence over to bring about this change. So this is a change that we have embarked upon, but it has to hit a tipping point when all of us will be part of this. Today we see somebody driving an electric car and we say, oh, check. But you go to check the price of it, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs. If it's halfway decent, right? Can't afford. I don't know about you, I can't.
No, that is right.
So, for change to become universal, that price has to drop. So we're in the midst of a change, but it's a longer range process than you and I know.
One more question and then we'll take a few from the online participants. One more question. Yes.
So very couple of questions, sorry for that.
Yeah, not more.
One is, in terms of the 2x2 matrix that you started your lecture with, what do you think is a transformative internal audit? What is your vision of a transformative internal? Because you gave an example of tactical improvements. I'm just thinking, what would be your vision of that?
I think we need to be real. If you are coming after the event, transformative internal audit is if you find something, if you unearth something that is hugely wrong, right? Otherwise, internal audit to me has to focus on small bits of improvement across processes, across systems, across controls. I would shudder to think that internal audit, unlike say strategy can think of far-reaching changes. I'll be nervous if a controller says I can think of far-reaching changes, but don't quote me to any controller. Controllers have to be conservative. So necessarily far-reaching transformative changes are in the realm of innovation, invention, discovery. Internal audit is not one. But you may find a wrongdoing, a bad practice, or a weak control that you bring to the fore. Right? So a business is going on that there is no knowledge about the business in any board resolution, and you highlight it. Right? Now, I don't think that is transferable. You're just bringing in good governance there. So I'm not sure where the tools you use for internal audit that can make your process more efficient, and what you can't humanly cover, you can cover through technology. But the impact that you would bring, it is not how you do things, it is the impact that you bring onto the other person. Right? That is incremental. let's say if you're a bank with 5,000 branches and you have scanned data across 5,000 and brought about original signature seen but not verified as an audit point. Today you may point it out looking at a sample of 100 or 200. Tomorrow you can point it out by saying the universe is the sample. You have just expanded the process, do more with less. But is that a transformation impact on the business? My view is no. Transformation impact is something that's strategic. This is a tactical issue. It was first or second question.
I think both you have answered. Thank you.
Some, you can maybe take a few online questions.
No, he has a question.
Like
She has a
one
question.
more, one more.
No, no, please don't say no.
Hi sir.
First of all, you have said that for the internal audit, first process is like SOP. So the policy should be there in the company. But in not like in a bigger company, but in the mid-sized company, we have seen that the policy are for the name set. The HOD, whenever there is like any as per the not line with the policy, then HOD said, आपको तो मालूम ही है सब ये सब तो ऐसे ही होता है. Then how to convince the management that SOP is the first step for the internal audit?
So that look at me. Can you think of somebody who can look more idiotic than I am? I am 1 unit down. I have no independent intelligence. So if you don't tell me this is the norm, what am I going to validate your actual practice against? And then leave the scary thought behind. If you don't say, then you may force me to say what is the norm.
Yeah.
And then you will be uncomfortable. So better you say than I say.
This is Vijay Kulkarni from Kirtan and Pandit. So, sir, my question is, how do we change the perception of the management towards us from internal auditors to trusted business advisors?
Difficult question to answer offhand. If you walk the talk and talk the walk, people will take you seriously. And it's interesting. Today was M&M audit committee, so I finished that, jumped into the car and came here. Right? And you know, Mr. Manoharan is the chairman of the audit committee, and I've been dutifully going and presenting every quarter. I think if you are perceived as somebody who talks the walk and walks the talk, then there is credit. Try not to be judgmental on either the person or the business. Focus on what is your finding. This is my observation. This is the risk to it. This is the risk to the business. Even if it's staring at you, there seems to be something funny. Put it down. It could suggest. Because you don't have enough information to make a conclusive statement. That requires an investigation process, not a regular audit process. So you need to walk the talk and talk the walk. Then you build credibility.
Sir, my question is that one of the widest gaps that I've found is the culture that the management believes the organization has and the culture as we as auditors see when we visit the various locations and interact. What is the pivotal role that internal audit can play in this space? Because this is a gap in many organizations where it is something where the management is blindsided, so to say.
Again, it's one of the things we introduced in HR internal audit. When I came in, HR internal audit was called payroll audit. Right? So I said that, remember, I love management consultants, I've learned so much from them. So I said, therefore I need to have a framework for HR. So I said, therefore let's look at employee life cycle. There's manpower planning, not manpower, headcount planning, resource planning. I was beaten up the other day when I used the term manpower. So it's headcount, resource planning. Resource planning, and recruitment, onboarding. So the person is on the seat. Then there is the payroll administration part of it. Then there is the retirement separation part of it. Then there is the ongoing life cycle, which is about leave, benefits, promotions, training, performance assessment, all of those. So we put them into separate buckets for audit. And then we kept compliance completely away from us, all the compliance with laws, because that is reviewed by somebody else. The HR head, you stand in front of the HR head and say, in the sample survey, out of this department of 210 people, 74 people worked 11 hours. Over your time check-in, check-out. 62 people worked 12 hours. 15 people. Now, is that a pattern or is it one-off? I'm not making a judgment, I'm presenting data. So, what is the standard statement of liberal-minded CEOs? We encourage our employees to maintain a healthy work-life balance. I can't go and disprove it by English language. I can only disprove it by data. Narayan Murthy once famously said, I too believe in God, but for everything else, please bring data to the table.
So, but with this data, will you be able to go to ACB, present this observation where your audit itself is not giving you a proper response to the observation?
I think you know me that I walk the talk and talk the walk. And there is this gentleman sitting there.
So suppose we are getting some.
So therefore, you need to create the platform, right? What was the greatness of Sachin Tendulkar? He made the bowler bowl to where he wanted him to bowl. He did not go there to face the bowling. His batting would dictate the bowler to bowl where he wanted him to bowl, and that's how he was on top of the bowler. You have to create that platform. You have to say that hitherto HR audits work this way. Now I want to look at it like this. Use some management jargon there. I want to look at, now can you seriously tell me somebody will say, no, don't look at employee life cycle this way? Would anybody say that? No, don't look at leave records. Or don't look at performance payout moderation. Will anybody say? They will not say. You look at the data, analyze it, and press it. Right? So, you have to be the Sachin Tendulkar. You have to take charge of what you want. See, the beauty of internal audit is you decide your plan. Most people just nod. How many, I don't know how many of you go into these things and make presentations to the audit committee, but in how many places have they said, no, don't do this, do this. You go with the plan. You create the pitch for like Sachin Tendulkar. Then the ball will come to where you want it to come. And watch a lot of movies so you can quote those movie scenes today. Thank you so much.